So it's incredibly important that the politicians in there are hearing about the climate science, but really they also need to be discussing how do we pay for this? How do we pay for the transition in a way that leaves nobody behind? And actually over 85 MPs in Parliament are supporting a bill to support polluters to pay. So the big oil and gas companies that have been making billions in profits every year just from UK production, it's time that they paid their fair share towards the transition that we need to make to a clean, safe future. Well, the oil and gas industry have known since the 1970s that burning fossil fuels is heating our planet. They knew the disaster that would come. It's no surprise to them, but they've continued to do it to make profits. And so it's only fair that the polluter pays principle should be used to recover some of that money to pay for the transition that we need now, and to pay for things that would benefit everyone right across the country and across the world. The polluter pays principle is not a new one. It's well established in law, and it's the kind of principle that we used for the tobacco industry, pharmaceuticals, and it is being used around the world for polluters, the fossil fuel polluters. But we need to really raise those taxes, and we need to end the subsidies. Profit-making companies never volunteer to pay taxes, but governments have the power to make them. Sometimes cities do, but mainly national governments have these powers, and it's time that those governments stood up to the fossil fuel interests that have had a stranglehold over politics for far too long, and made them pay their fair share. Yes, oil, gas and coal companies always pay taxes. They just don't pay enough, and they find ways and loopholes to avoid taxes. And we're saying, first we need to stop the subsidies, we need to stop the loopholes, and we need to increase the taxes. The oil and gas industry in this country pays something like 78% tax on its profits, but there are too many loopholes that allow it to avoid these taxes. But also, campaigns around the world are using the law courts to sue companies for damages. There's a live case at the moment. A community in the Philippines is suing Shell for damages. In the United States, there are campaigns right across the country already. New York and Vermont have introduced super funds that are forcing those oil and gas companies to pay up for the damage that's been caused in those cities, and many, many other cities around the US are having those fights as well. I think history is on our side. The momentum is on our side. There are many, many governments now that are looking at fair taxes. There are cities and subnational governors around the world that are raising taxes, that are suing corporations. There are many, many people calling for fairer taxes on the oil and gas industry that drove us to the brink of climate disaster. So these taxes are coming, and we need them to pay for the transition in our countries, to transition from high fossil fuel industries to safer, cleaner ways forward, and to pay for the damage that they've caused across the world that's ripped billions off the economies of countries in the global south, communities that had nothing to do with the cause of climate change and are bearing all the responsibility. We need the funds to pay for training, to pay for support for communities to transition from high fossil fuel industry. We need to support communities with training to transition from oil and gas industry jobs to other jobs, and we can't afford to repeat what happened in Britain, for example, with the coal industry. When it was smashed apart, those communities never had any support to make the transition, and many of them are still languishing in desperate situations with high drug use and desperately poor communities. We can't afford to repeat that mistake. We need a just transition. We need a transition that leaves no one behind.